I was actually at NASA here for 7 years, both in the synthetic biology program and in the space portal and in the bioscience division, so it's nice to be back. It's also a little sad that there's nothing to do with space on my slides anymore, because I've pivoted into industry, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that pivot and why I went into industry in a second. SynBioBeta is a global innovation network for the synthetic biology industry, and we connect up academics and scientists who have technology that they want to commercialize, and we connect those to co-founders who want to start companies, and we help to connect those proto-companies to investors who then want to invest in the companies. And as the industry's grown, and I'll show you some data on the growth of it over the last 10 years, we then help to connect those startup companies and the growing ecosystem to the larger innovation ecosystem out there. So you'll see a lot of new entries into the synthetic biology industry from companies like Microsoft and GE, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. The main activity for SynBioBeta is the annual summit that we do in San Francisco every year. You can see it on the screen behind me. And this year, something new that we're doing is called Synthetic Biology Week. There's going to be over 100 satellite events happening throughout the Bay Area, so I hope you can come to that. So what is synthetic biology? Synthetic biology is really a rebirth of genetic engineering. If you look at recombinant DNA technology over the last 40 years, and you look at what's happening with synthetic biology, you could say synthetic biology is nothing new, it's just a new name for genetic engineering or metabolic engineering or bioprocess engineering. And you'd be right in a certain way. What synthetic biology focuses on, and what the word that I use often, is that synthetic biology is a movement. It's not necessarily a specific technology, but it's a movement, and the movement is to make biology easier to engineer. How many people in the room have pipetted before? So we know that biology is not easy to engineer. In fact, biology is one of the most messiest disciplines out there, and the variability that we see is not like an engineering discipline. If you go into a lot of synthetic biology labs now, you'll see that the pipette is not used as much as it used to be. There's a lot of new technologies that are coming online, automation technologies, big data technologies, machine learning, and they're all trying to make biology a more predictable, robust, and engineerable discipline. So the definition that I'm going to give you is that synthetic biology is trying to make biology easier to engineer. It's still not easy to engineer, but that's the vision that the movement has. What's driving the industry? I said it's not a new technology, but it's certainly a shift in the cost of some of these fundamental technologies. So on the chart behind me, you can see in the green is the falling cost of synthesizing DNA, that is making ACs, Ts, and Gs. And in the red, you can see the falling costs of reading DNA, that's sequencing DNA. So you can see, and this is a log chart, this is dollars per base pair of DNA read and dollars per base pair of DNA written. You can see it crashed in about 2004, the price of reading DNA, because Illumina came online and next generation sequencing. And you can see, again, this is a log scale, so a very fast decline in the price of synthesizing DNA, down to about 10 cents per base pair. What's happened over the same period of time is the growth of the synthetic biology industry. So we track through a company database that we have the number of companies that call themselves synthetic biology companies. There are now over 500 companies globally. When we started SynBioBeta in 2012, there were 269. So we've seen a doubling just in the last 6 years. And the reason that there's so many new companies starting, or at the same time, I should say, a lot of investment is going into synthetic biology. So there was over $1 billion in 2015, over $1 billion in 2016, and 1.7, I think, billion dollars in 2017. Already in 2018, we're not even out of Q1, and there's been hundreds of millions of dollars already. So we're definitely already ahead by 2017 numbers. And what's fueling a lot of that is Silicon Valley investors who are getting behind synthetic biology, and they're seeing the industry as the next programmable matter. So you've seen the microprocessor industry, you've seen the internet industry, you've seen the mobile industry, software as a service industry. All of these are about programming matter to do different things, and Silicon Valley is getting behind synthetic biology. I also have a small VC fund with Data Collective, where we invest in seed companies at the seed and pre-seed stage. So what are all these companies doing, these 500 companies? Well, we like to break it down in something we call the synthetic biology stack. And at the base of the stack, you have reading and writing genes and genomes. Next up, you have a tools layer of the stack, and those companies are doing bioautomation, computer-aided design for genes and genomes. Then we have cloud labs and automation, and I'll tell you what a cloud lab is in a second if you're not familiar with it. Then we have platforms for engineering organisms, and then right at the top we have various different applications that the companies are doing. Some of the gene and genome synthesis players that if you're in the bioindustry, you've probably ordered either short oligos from them or longer DNA synthesis from them. One of the rising stars of the industry is Twist Bioscience up in San Francisco. They've raised over $200 million. And one of their partners, believe it or not, is Microsoft. Why does Microsoft want to invest in synthetic DNA? They are investing in synthetic DNA as they see a potential for data storage in DNA. If you go just up the road to Facebook and you look at how Facebook stores petabytes of data, you may imagine that it's still stored on in digital memory, but it's not. It's still stored in tape drives for long-term storage. So this is, hard to believe. So this is the equivalent stored in DNA, and if you might have heard this before, but you can store the entire Library of Congress in a single test tube. In a single Eppendorf tube, you can store a copy of the entire Library of Congress stored in A's, C's, T's, and G's. So there's a lot happening in this particular area. And there's another couple of companies that are now coming up with new ways to synthesize DNA using engineered enzymes to make it faster and cheaper. So I bring these up because if you're going to be engineering organs, then you've got to be thinking about what the future looks like for DNA synthesis, because you don't just need to make a tweak here or there or use gene editing. You can actually now synthesize whole genomes. You can synthesize whole organisms. It's still very expensive, but go back to the charts that I showed you for the falling cost in synthesizing DNA and think what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years to synthesize complete genomes. What do you do when you synthesize a complete genome? Well, many grad students in the room probably used, or people in the room who were grad students 5 or 10 years ago might have used a pen and paper to actually edit DNA, or maybe Microsoft Word or Notepad. Now there's a whole slew of new tools out there for editing and engineering genomes. Just a few of them on the screen behind, including one called Benchling, which is up in the city. Cloud labs and automation is another piece of the stack. You've heard of cloud because of Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure. What you may not have heard of is the cloud lab, which is the equivalent infrastructure that is stored in somebody else's lab that you can then access. So there's a whole number of cloud labs and automation companies. One of them in particular is called Transcriptic, that's raised almost $30 million. You can go on and through an API, you can directly control machines that are in their lab. So you don't need to actually have a lab to do synthetic biology or biotechnology anymore. You can outsource your experiments directly to this company, but you can access their their laboratory via an API, just like you might access Amazon Web Services. And there's also new automation tools that are coming online to allow people to screen via mass spec tens of millions of cells at a time. So this is the application of high throughput data gathering, which you can then apply tools like AI, machine learning to analyze the data. So there's a big impact that we're seeing on automation and high throughput data gathering that's going to ripple through the entire industry very soon. Next, we have organism engineering platforms. These are companies that don't just make one organism or one product, but they make many different kinds of, they make an organism that can make many different kinds of products. Some that you may or may not have heard of, Ginkgo Bioworks and Zymergen have raised huge amounts of money. Zymergen $174 million and Ginkgo $429 million, all for automated strain engineering pipelines. And some of these are starting to apply their automation pipelines to eukaryotes, to mammalian cells. So I think there's a huge opportunity here. One of the companies in this pool is eGenesis, which you may have heard of. eGenesis is one of the companies that George Church founded, and they're using CRISPR to modify the pig organ genome so that they can humanize pig organs. So particular relevance to this group. And the second is synthetic genomics at the bottom of this chart. That's one of Craig Venter's companies, and again, they're using pig organs to humanize pig lungs, to make pig lungs more human. And by using synthetic biology and by using CRISPR, I think that offers a huge opportunity for making pig organs more human-like. You look at the genome of the pig organ, you look at the genome of the human organ, and you use CRISPR to turn one into the other. So very exciting work in those two areas. And then Martine Rothblatt and United Therapeutics has a partnership with synthetic genomics. And I think Intrexon is also looking at that issue. So a very hot and exciting area. Next up, you get to the application layer where companies are more focused on what's the product and what's the value to the end user. And there's a whole flourishing of different companies in this area. We have a weekly newsletter that keeps track of all the new applications and technologies and funding, and I welcome you to sign up for that. And I'm looking forward to the breakout group afterwards, so thank you all very much.